Well, hello, everyone. This is Jeff Roster, your host for This Week in Innovation. And no, that's not a new slide that we're doing for this week. That is, in fact, a slide from Creating a Great Show, which is a podcast hosted by Casey Cheshire, and asked me to be on it. So I thought I would share that with this audience. It isn't tech specific. It's really more about how to build a podcast, how to communicate. But I do think there's some really valuable lessons that startups can learn from how we build podcasts and how we think about asking questions. And that's also going to help you to answer some of those questions. So why don't you give it a listen and let us know what you think.
Ladies and gents, this is the moment you've been waiting for. A podcast for podcasters. This is Creating the Greatest Show, and I'm your host, Casey Cheshire. Join me as we interview podcast hosts and investigate the ingredients of a successful interview podcast. We'll talk mistakes, earned skills, powerful questions, and more. This show is sponsored by Ringmaster, completely done for you B2B podcast production. Hey guys, welcome back. I am so excited to talk to my guest today. He is a pro, and I am going to school, but the cool kind of school. So who is this guy? Who is he? Well, he's a strategic advisor, a podcaster, a thought leader in the retail space. Some might call him a retail wizard. He was the Rethink Retail top retail influencer in 2021 and 2022. That word there is influencer. And then his shows, he shows out the wazoo, producer and co-host of This Week in Innovation. Love that word. In the Third Eye Podcast Network, strategic advisor, retail at the Third Eye Advisory, strategic advisor at Comterra pricing platform. Jeff Roster, welcome to the show, sir.
Hey, Casey, good to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
Well, you're a big guy, and you've got a lot of things going on.
But I want to get smaller. That's the whole point.
I'm
coming down. So hopefully I'm going to be a
medium-sized
medium-sized guy.
Well, your intro keeps getting bigger, and hopefully you keep getting personally smaller.
That's the plan.
That's what to wish people in the holidays, right? May your intro grow larger and your body smaller.
That's good. That's good media right there. I'm stealing that. You better get that on Twitter today.
Wait,
I'm stealing that going forward.
Publish this quick. Let's go live. Oh anyway, man,
sorry.
Well, I am so excited. We almost got into the show beforehand, and we had to stop ourselves and say, "Oh yeah, that's right. We gotta start this and hit record." Do you ever have that experience too, where you're just in the moment? And
so I talk to a ton of startups. My gig is to talk. This Week in Innovations targeted at the startup world, or press or analysts or people that can speak about the trends in retail. The show's really not targeted towards like the bigger players. It's really to give a voice to the whole world of innovation. And I always want to do a pre-call with them. One, because I'm interested. Two, I want to make sure that they have good audio, and they have a story to tell. And usually I throw out the question. Sometimes I'll not pre-brief, but give the, hey, here's what I want to understand. And these guys spring load, boom, right off the bat, they're into it. Oh, no, stop. Cause I want it fresh. Cause it sounds good. And so 100%. And I don't know, in my gig, it's kind of, if I'm trying to understand a company, I mean, I want them talking. I want to listen to it as long as it's fresh. So yeah, it's definitely a challenge that I have on, throwing podcasting into the world of being an analyst.
Yeah, especially when your guest is spring loaded. It's absolutely crazy. And I know you're spring loaded to answer this next question, which is our first question. We kind of gave you a little preview there, people, of what's going to go on here. But really, my question to you, Jeff, pull back the curtain for us on your show and share your most important strategy for a great interview podcast.
So I already tipped my hand a little bit. My job is to talk to the startup world, to get inside those companies. So by definition, almost anybody that is crazy enough to leave a nice, safe job and go do something entrepreneurially are interesting. I have not met one, and I literally mean that. I've not met one that doesn't have an interesting story to say. So I guess if it's a secret, what I've found out is ask a single sentence question and then shut up. Get out of the way. I've always talked when I was working analyst at Gartner and IHL. My tagline always was let the data be the star. If you've got good data, present it and then just get out of the way. You don't have to you used to drive my folks at my previous employers crazy because like, well, talk about the data. Well, why would I talk? The data's there. Show the slide, and people are not stupid. I don't have to say, wow, this is a 30% increase, or I could say this is a 30% increase. No, let people make that interpretation. What was funny, Casey, is if you go back and listen to my first 15 podcasts, they're great interviews, but they're so painful because I would ask a question, I would answer my own question because I'm an analyst, and then I would redirect to the same question. And I didn't realize what I was doing until I started using a program called Descript, which just takes audio and translates it into basically a Word document. And and then you could edit the Word document and whatnot. And so I would see myself, and my questions would be a paragraph and a half long. It's like, this is nuts. And I'm stepping on these good lines. And so then, seeing how terrible I was asking questions and realizing the better questions are, hey, so tell me about your story. To an entrepreneur, I mean, that's everything. Just get out of the way. Ask that one question, get out of the way, and let them answer it. And 80% of those folks are just going to hit that one out of the park. It's usually you got to bring them in as opposed to ramp them up. There've been a few where and I've always pre-brief them. I say, listen, my first question is tell me about yourself and tell me about your company and the problem you're trying to solve. So those are basically three questions which should lead them through a nice discussion.
Do you ask all three of those at once, or those?
Yeah, well, I queue them up. And ahead of time, that's the one question I always give them. Hey, listen, my deal is I let them do their own introduction. A couple of reasons why, because a bunch of people have names I couldn't even begin to pronounce. So that saves me that embarrassment of sort of crushing somebody's name. And two, I've probably done, a couple hundred formal presentations at conferences and whatnot. And the way that always has worked is somebody at a conference a vendor's paying to be the person to introduce the speaker. That's kind of a slot or whatever. And you'd get up and listen to read your bio. And it's so painful because they're reading it and there's no energy there. And it's also too long. And so I just thought, you know what, why don't, instead of me, now I know you do it, that's your thing. And it really worked out great. It was fun. As a matter of fact, I'm going to grab that and use that going forward. But I just let them tell their story. And so I just tee them up, introduce yourself, what you're doing, you're an entrepreneur, and then what problem you're trying to solve. So I just cue that up. And so, because all three of those questions should really just be a nice 3 or 4 minute dissertation about what they are.
Got it.
I used to be at XYZ company, had this idea, we launched this company, and then it just leads in as opposed to. But I just want to make sure all three of those get answered in a nice, tight, clean package.
Got it. So I totally get that, because you're saying, look, when in doubt, ask a single question and then shut up.
Shut up.
And then if you're going to ask something more complex, it sounds like you're prepping them in advance, saying,
yes,
this is the way I want it to go. This is a rough flow of the show.
Yep.
It's 3 parts of the question, so don't get confused, but here's the 3 things I want you to address so that you can then ask a complex question on the show, and then you don't have to explain yourself because they know.
And the other thing is it's really, it's a classic elevator pitch. And
right.
If you're an entrepreneur, you've got to be spring loaded, 2 or 3 minutes, who you are, what your company is, and what you're trying to solve. So it's literally just asking the question they should dial in, which also tells me a lot as an analyst. Okay, where are they in their evolution as an organization? Because if they can't do that immediately, if they don't do that well, and there's been times where I've, because these are, I want to do it on a show. I want to present companies, but I'm also not, the old Mike Wallace. I'm not trying to trip somebody up and go, see, you're not, no, why would I do that? I want to help them. Yeah, exactly. So there've been a few times where we've done it, and man, it just wasn't really great. And I just, because we're not live streaming. So I just stop and say, hey, you tell your own story, but here's what I'm hearing. And they go, oh, I didn't realize that. And it's because they're smart people, but they're not necessarily media people. And so, it's like, that's such an easy value add for me to say, kind of think through what you're saying here. And here's what I'm hearing it, but here's what really would be stronger point. Cause this is a really strong point, by the way. You got really hog-tied into the weeds here. I get and they're usually engineers, or usually now they're AI folks. They're 10,000 times smarter than I am, but then they get lost in their brain power. And it's like, hey, take it down to the normal human being who's just trying to understand how your thing would work. And so it's it could be a little bit educational, and I'm fine with that. I'm down with that. That's my job. So
let's talk about those single sentence questions. You've got the complex ones where you're prepping them in advance. You saw your words or you heard yourself and saw your words and you thought, this is too long of a question. Even right now, I'm pondering my question. Do you prep your questions in advance?
Well, it depends. I've always, as an analyst, I've briefed with the biggest companies on the planet. Literally the biggest companies on the planet. Actually, at my Gartner days, those were not exclusively, but those were the people that had access to me. So
Like
shockingly, well, more on the tech side. So IBM,
yeah.
Oracle, SAP, JDA, Microsoft. Just go to every single one of those folks, because I covered the retail industry. And so the vendors that use their technology in the process of retailing, which by the way is everyone, Intel.
Right.
Everyone, because it's a $4 trillion industry in the US. So it's every tech player on the planet is either building a point of sale device or their cloud, or it's everyone. So those who, I talked to retailers, but my focus primarily was trying to understand the retail, the vendor selling the retail sector. So those guys aren't really going to jump on a call if they don't know what you're looking for. And as an analyst, I don't want to be on a call with them sort of flailing around. So I would have it really, in those days, it wasn't a script, but it was an outline. So I want to know, who you are as a company. And obviously that's, Microsoft. Okay. I get who you are, but what solutions are you talking about? Really important. If you're talking to like a Microsoft or an Oracle, are you talking about their supply chain, CRM, whatever? So in my outline, I would want to know, okay, what solutions are we talking about? I'd want to know their alliance strategy, who they're partnering with, who are the key executives. Or revenue was a big one in the old days. I don't care about that now, but if you're building a market forecast, you do it two ways. What are retailers spending tech on, but also what are vendors, where are vendors' revenues, and so you can get it both ways. And so I would just have this list.
All prepped, like you have like pages of prep behind.
Yeah, no, it's believe it or not, it's only my interview outline is or agenda is really only one page. But if you looked at that, I've had friends that
size 10 font.
Yeah, it did. But so one question, tell me your retail strategy. Okay, that's one sentence. That's a dissertation. That could be the answer to that could be 50 pages. So I'm asking one page of questions, and people look at that and go, oh my God, I'm going to spend the next 3 months answering that. And the point I'd always push back is, well, one, you shouldn't be spending 3 months because this is stuff you should have spring loaded like that. And two, if you're getting paid to be an analyst, director of analyst relations. So anyway, I would laugh and various vendors would give me, iterations for that. But if you're asking me what I want in a vendor briefing, I want everything, and you decide how much you're going to give. So I took that. So that's sort of been my mentality, because that's how I spent, my entire career. So when I popped into the podcast world, it just was sort of logical. If I'm talking to a startup, I'm assuming they're not necessarily always media skilled. And they probably have, depending on where they are in their evolution, they probably might not even have professional advice. So I'm giving them a script, but it's a straightforward script. Who are you as an executive? What's your background? What's your company? What problem you're solving? Those 4 iterations. And that should walk them through, a complete understanding of who they are. And what I want them to understand is you got to be able to operate in 2 levels. You got to be able down in the weeds with the engineers, but I'm telling you, there's not a CEO on the planet that wants to hear, 50 minutes on your cloud strategy and how fast your upload or download speeds are. They don't care. They want to know the strategy side. And that's always been my interest is the strategy side. So sometimes I have to sort of pull them up higher and get them out of the weeds. And other times maybe, whatever, but it gives me a lot of insight. And my audience is the innovation ecosystem inside retail. So those are CIOs, those are marketing people. It's just a whole iteration, and it's much more interesting to hear the strategy side than getting down into the speeds and feeds sort of stuff. And I have clients that are, I won't call them out, but you can just imagine. They're super technical. They're the nuts and bolts of
nerds.
A computer. I'm not gonna. They're my friends, so I don't want to get flamed. But I mean, it's like, dude, I literally could care less the speed of the processor you're building. I could care less about that. I know it's painful, but I don't care. And if I don't care, the CEO of a retailer probably doesn't care. So talk to speeds and feeds where it's appropriate, but more interesting to give the high level strategy of what you're trying to accomplish.
Do you tend to see any trends around the level someone is in a company and to how tactical they might answer questions?
No, it's funny. So trends. I think the trend more is how media exposed they are, or how often they've worked with analysts. And I could tell that within 10 seconds of somebody talking.
Sure.
There are executives who run billions of dollars of business in the retail space, and they are absolutely people I've known for 20 years. And I mean, it's the way I've always described the analyst job versus the vendor executive job is, remember that old cartoon when we were, you're far younger than I am, but the sheepdog and the wolf, not Wile E. Coyote, but where they sort of go at each other, the sheepdog's trying to defend the sheep from the wolf, and the whole cartoon's just slapstick, whatever. Sure. And if you remember one of the scenes where they get done at the end of the day, they both check out and they go, "Hey, see you, Fred." So it's, in other words, they're friends.
I have seen that. Yeah.
That is exactly the perfect scenario for what a perfect analyst vendor relationship should be. Inside the conversation, it's not adversarial, but it needs the analyst, if he's doing the job right, needs to push back and try to understand, because in theory, the analyst is talking to also end users. And so I've never wanted to be, but I did want to like, hey, I know that's not true because by the way, I've talked to everybody in the industry. And so I had 3 people that used to work for you 6 months ago that I'm talking to now. So I know that's not true. So
have you said that on a podcast?
100%. Not on the air. It's not on the air because I'm not talking to that level of executive.
I kind of wish you would. It sounds really fun.
Well, yeah, exactly. And then I would my car might blow up the next day. I mean, when I used to describe my work back in my Gartner and IHL days, I sort of, maybe it's not the best example anymore, but I sort of described it as a CIA guy. If you knew what I was doing, I probably was doing my job wrong. In other words, I'm talking privately. So I'm talking to the vendor. And then I'm also talking to end users about how to absorb technology. So I was never in this scenario where I needed to go out and be, controversial. I didn't have to. Why? I had everyone coming to me. So my work was always done quietly. So that's not necessarily the best setup for the podcast world because,
right.
But then again, I'm not talking to the big players anymore because I'm not interested in that.
You don't need to start 3 million people listening because
so I just want to talk to the startups, and then they're in a whole different deal where they are trying to make noise, and they're and so what I'm also finding is I'm getting a lot better insight into the evolution, the innovation world, because the startup folks are literally innovating technology and are very comfortable talking about them. And the big deal is retailers that are involved in the innovation cycle also want to talk, which is radically different behavior than retailers kind of using, classic technologies where everything is a competitive advantage. And I don't want to tell people about this vendor because we think we're doing something different. Truth, nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. The retail industry's made their technology acquisitions far more expensive by making everything so we were doing something so special. No, you're not. I'm telling you, you're not. For the most part, you're not. Very few other industries are quite as insular as retail is, and it's made technology absorption a lot more expensive in my mind.
I love the comparison between the role of analyst and podcaster. It sounds like there's so many similarities, the investigative side to it.
Yeah.
What are the differences? What are the things that you've had to change and rewrite in your mind?
The whole point about, as an analyst, when I was playing at the level I was playing at, which was, pretty high, if my work was private, I was talking to a retailer thinking about using this vendor, or I was talking to a vendor who was trying to pitch me to make sure I understood, so everything I didn't do my work in the headlines. It was private, and that was how it was supposed to do. Well, obviously podcaster is the exact opposite of that. You have to find people that want to tell a compelling story that you think is important for other people to hear. And so it's the same level of investigative research, and you got to have your BS meter like on high, and you got to be listening for jargon, and you got to be listening for I don't buy that, or you're come on. I mean,
Yeah.
I know I know what you're saying. It's not
The
right.
bullshit meter is still
Yeah, I
alive and
didn't want to
kicking.
say that, but that's exactly the right
Okay,
word.
yeah.
So it's the same foundational work, but it's a different gig. And the other thing I think as a podcaster, it kind of goes back to my hypothesis is you got to ask one question and shut up. What I found really worked well for me inside my analyst relationship is, and I don't see this, I guess I can say it. It's been long enough now. I got pretty good scores in my Gartner days for doing inquiry, and I was asked to kind of listen in some other analysts who weren't really getting good scores. And it was funny because I'm not the smartest guy. I went to, California State University at Chico. I put myself through school. So, I'm kind of, simple old cowboy riding the fence. And I got to listen to some people from some really big schools. And what I found was, a person would call in with a problem and have a conversation, and the analyst would talk 60-70% of the time. And if you listen to me, because again, I'm a simple old cowboy. I'm not smart enough to talk a lot, but I listened. And what I found was a pattern that people would call in with a question for an inquiry, and it was never really the real question they wanted. There was always a cover. And so if I was just shut up, and listen. So, okay, tell me about your problem. And then you go on and on and on. Or they would go on and on and on. It's like, oh, okay, well, have you thought about this? A lot of times people would be bringing their entire team in for an inquiry, and somebody had a hidden agenda or wanted an outside person to either confirm or push back on something. If you're saying, oh, I'm so smart, I went to, Harvard or Yale or, any one of the other places, let me tell you what I think. You're not even listening to what they want. Again, shut up, ask a question, and then shut up and listen, and then respond, as opposed to giving a dissertation. And so that I think is a challenge if you're a podcaster, if you want to talk more than you want to listen, or you don't have the right guest. Now, if you're doing a monologue, you have to talk. That's fine. Okay. But I don't want to do that. I want to bring in, my whole gig is I want to bring in, I want to bring the voice of the entrepreneur in, because I think we're getting almost away from that in this country. When I grew up, I grew up in the 80s, and we entrepreneurs were the way to go. Silicon Valley was all built on entrepreneurs. Every single company out here started with somebody with a vision. And some of those people are within my lifetime. Google was within my career.
I remember pre-Google. I remember Alta Vista, Yahoo.
Absolutely.
Ask Jeeves. There used to be multiple search engines.
Absolutely. In my career as an analyst, I watched some of the biggest players get launched. Still pains me because I couldn't buy any stock, because at that time, you couldn't own it. So I had a colleague that said, this company's about to launch in Mountain View. It's going to make housing so much more expensive. That company was Google. Wow. So we knew it. I couldn't even buy their stock because they were either a potential client, or certainly were a client, or had impact in retail. So that was our model. And so
taking that paycheck and invested it then.
Don't even, come on. It's Microsoft. It's Apple. I remember looking at Apple when the Apple stock was in the, and we thought they were dead. And oh my goodness, let me put $500 into that stock, and you and I might not be talking right now, or you might be talking to me from my private yacht.
I was going to say, maybe you invited me out to your island, and we're sitting in your beach house doing this podcast interview.
Yeah, that would be cool.
We're talking about Hawaiian shirts and not about something else.
Exactly.
You might still be podcasting, though. I think you'd still find your way into it.
No, I tell you, you got, and that's the other thing. I think if you want to be a good podcaster, you have to have the passion to want to tell a story or do something. There's some motivation inside you that has to get out. And that's what's kind of interesting.
My question, I hear you 100% on the shut up, the listening. And what an interesting example about the analysts who didn't listen, who talked too much. And you mentioned at some point you respond. Do do you find it challenging? Are you ever tempted to respond like an analyst and take over the show with all this knowledge you've accumulated?
No. And you know why?
Yeah, tell
Because
me.
the one piece of technology called Descript, which is again, and I'm not getting paid for it, but I'm just telling you it's a game changer. It basically, if we took this video and dropped it into Descript, it would transcribe, using AI, it would transcribe our conversation, and then you can, because it'll identify voices. So, it'll ask, okay, this voice, it's Casey, this voice is Roster, and boom. And then all of a sudden, and then you can highlight that text, and all of a sudden you see if I'm dominating 70% of the show or 60% of the show, it ain't a good show. So that's the thing that, I know in the back of my head, I'm going to have to look at that, and I'm going to have to read me asking a question, then answering my own question, then looping back, and then kind of putting and it's the most painful thing in the world when you see that. It's like, oh, shut up. And that was a game changer for me.
So you have that feedback loop, but what about, you even mentioned and then you respond as an analyst, you listen for a long time, but then they're paying you to tell them what the truth is. Is it just, it's different on a podcast because you don't get to say the truth? I experienced this too, right?
Yeah. Well, you do get to say the truth. It depends on what you're doing in a podcast. So with This Week in Innovation, I'm talking to the startup world, and I'm talking to a entrepreneur. So if he says, hey, what do you think of my solution? I'm going to give the answer. Guess what? Nobody's stupid enough to do that. There's no way they're going to do that. So
I encourage people on prep calls to ask me questions, because I'm like, please, someone ask me a question.
So like two or three of the pods where that rule of me just asking a question, shutting up, are out the window. That was when I did with my friend Greg Busick, who's a fellow analyst, and I have a series right now that I'm dropping called Run Up to NRF. And what that is, NRF is National Retail Federation. It's a big show. It's a massive show in retail. It's in January. So cool. I'm asking analysts, what are the mistakes you see vendors or startups make, and analysts, AR people, PR people, other retailers, just so the startup community, because we see the same mistakes every single time.
Yeah.
Hey, how do I get in your writing? Hey, well, don't worry about getting my writing. Tell me your story first. It's so insulting. It's there's an example I won't use because it's inappropriate, but it's given me some vision as to how some people think when they interact. Don't immediately try to, hey, I want to get in. How do I get in your writing? Stop it. Tell me your story, and then also do it cleanly and tightly, and like all these sort of things. And so when I had Greg come on, we're both analysts, and we're both, any one of us can just dominate a conversation if we wanted to. So that was the only time, because I'd ask a question, what's a mistake a typical startup would make? And Greg would give me his answer. Then I would just add on my thoughts onto it. So it's the only conversation where I knew going in, it's going to be at least 50-50. And I think in that it probably was pretty close to 50-50, because we're both answering. I'm asking a question we both could answer, and we've both worked together forever. I actually worked for him right after Gartner for a few years. So that was the only case where I had a lot to add. And then when I did another part of the run-up series, I spoke with a friend that was analyst relations person. So I would ask her, how do you prep your clients for that engagement? And then because she's also a podcaster, she'd ask me, so what do you think, Jeff? And so she would tee me back up. And so in that case, it was super appropriate to really have those conversations almost be 50-50 with people that wanted to answer their question, but also wanted to see how the analysts would respond to their answer. And it was really a cool conversation. But if I'm talking to a startup, I don't want to be dominant. That's not going to be a good interview if I'm talking too much.
I wonder if it's something where they are your voice, the guests you have on, that you curate and you explore, they're almost speaking for you, which can be great if they're saying the right things, which could be a little frustrating if they're not.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. One of those topics is kind of hot right now, the term metaverse. And it's a term that is kind of spring loaded. Matter of fact, as late as about 10 minutes before this interview, I was in exchange with a super secret exchange with a bunch of fellow analysts, all from different firms. And some just have a super negative view of the term metaverse. I'm a multi-engine pilot. I have trained in simulators. I
Wow.
know all about augmented reality. We've been using it in aviation for 20 years. The metaverse is a terrible term. The term I like is a friend of mine coined, or I don't know if he coined it, but he's popularized, and I'm on the train called immersive commerce. So in other words, instead of talking about I won't say the
Sounds
name,
way better.
I won't say the name, but let's just say a very large software or a very large social media platform has really gone all in the metaverse and probably have done more to sort of muddle the whole thing.
Yeah,
But
is this particular platform the one that spent more than the Apollo moon landing mission to create the metaverse?
Put it this way: I'm out in Silicon Valley. I could probably throw a rock and hit that company. So I don't want to rally up young billionaires who probably are feeling a little bit tender right now.
They'll send the assassins to your house, right?
I don't. But if some of those people would actually have talked to people that have a little bit of gray hair and say, hey, how should we phrase this? Hey, how about not try to dominate something that's happening naturally? But the point is that there's plenty of examples of retailers using augmented reality. Plenty of examples of retailers now starting to use Roblox, which is a company I didn't even know about because my kids are 25. They grew up way before that whole thing. All of a sudden, about a year and a half ago, I started hearing about this company, and I looked at it. I couldn't believe the market cap. And like, what do? They play games. Well, there are retailers. A small one called Walmart is public about it. And they're using that Roblox platform to create games that are drawing people in. There's even better examples. They're not public yet. I wish I could, but it blows up the whole idea that the metaverse is really boy centric. It's going to go across, boy, girl, whatever, however you identify, whatever. And so there's plenty of examples of pieces of metaverse technology that are being massively adopted. Mm-hmm. So some of my analyst friends are like, oh, metaverse, this is stupid, because they're thinking about it from that one particular social media platform who's created this insane thing, but there's a lot of real technology there. And so the concept of immersive commerce is just, how do we do something different? Live streaming would be an example of immersive commerce. Well, live stream is also kind of a metaverse technology. I can find plenty of examples in North America now. Now, China, it's a done deal. There's no question. The numbers that retailers generate on live streaming, it's many billions of dollars. It's a done deal in China. Here in the US, there's really interesting examples. We're probably at least 5 to 6 years behind what China's doing for some of their live streaming capabilities. But I don't know if we're going to catch up. It doesn't matter. There's examples. There's really good examples of these companies using pieces of this technology. So my old company, Gartner, has identified metaverse as one of their top strategic initiatives for 2023. I don't like the term metaverse because I know it has negative energies, but I don't care. I'm just looking at adoption of technology and wanting to make sure I'm understanding how things are evolving. And as a guy that's trying to get carbs out of my diet, I will buy the goggles where I can walk into a store and say, okay, anything that has, carbs above this level, like, blot it out. I don't want to see it, or highlight stuff that I do. Some simple piece of technology like that, I'm just waiting for somebody to embrace, so I can just go through and just, easily get the stuff that I need, that I want. That's one simple example of how immersive commerce or metaverse technologies will really radically impact what retail is going to do. Live streaming. You're probably a media guy. Well, you are a media guy. B&H Photo. Do you know who those folks are?
No.
Okay. So B&H Photo. So you're a photo guy. I'm a photo guy. B&H Photo is the greatest photo shop left probably in America. They're downtown New York City. B&H Photo, it is a photographer's dream. Now, obviously, they're big into microphones and all this stuff that we use for this process. So their salespeople, it's a superstore, it's a retail store, but their salespeople are super knowledgeable, really experts. They're all photographers, experts. So if you're buying a piece of camera equipment, high-end camera equipment, you're going to B&H Photo. Well, somebody said, why don't we just take one of these webcams, these $50 webcams we have, and plug it in and let people talk, because I bought, don't tell my wife, but I'd bought multiple $1,000 camera lenses by texting back and forth in a live chat sort of a thing. And it'll work great because I'm in Silicon Valley. I'm not going to fly 2,000 miles to go to their store. I'd love to, but it's not. Well, somebody said, why don't we just plug in a microphone and a $50 webcam, and all of a sudden, instead of texting back and forth, now I'm having this conversation. It's the simplest thing on the planet. That's live streaming. So
Wow.
if you're a retailer and you have high-end, high-quality people, why in the world would you not bring in that? That's a metaverse technology, or it's immersive commerce technology. So that's how a term that is kind of like, some people, I don't want to put a headset on and, climb into some alternate reality. Well, how about we just use the technology that works? And so that's where the gig as an analyst, sometimes, you bump into that and you see, pushback on something crazy, but you can also see adoption. So you have to make that decision. Where do I stand on something? So do I kind of go with the cool kids that say, "Oh, this is stupid," or do I say, "No, this is nonsense. Don't let, you can see this adoption of all these various things over here." Another term that was really popular in retail about 4 years ago, before COVID, was the retail apocalypse. And this is the idea that retail was imploding. And it was nonsense. It was really it just was silly. It was clickbait that poor journalists that just wanted to make noise would use because they would get downloads. Well, we did at IHL, we did a lot of work, and shockingly, now this is before COVID. Now, COVID was a retail apocalypse. It had nothing to do. It had to do with shutting stores down for 6 months. Some stores, not all stores, and having people get afraid to even go into a physical store. So that was a different deal. But this was before, and what we found out was no, there were more stores opening than closing, and the majority of the stores that were closing tended to be department stores who had literally run out of customers.
Right.
I won't say which department stores, but those of us in the know,
It rhymes with Cheers, and it rhymes with
okay, I could say that. That's the easy
different
one.
places.
I want to
ask you though, like things are definitely changing, and you mentioned passion is a thing, and I feel the passion from you. And so it's almost like that's this underlying value and flavor, the difference between like just a dish and something that you got from a Michelin restaurant or a fine chef is that passion. I can sense that from you for your podcasting. So on the flip side of that passion and excitement, and what are the challenges? What are the challenges you're facing with podcasting?
Knowledge and how to do it. So, I'm right on the edge of a boomer or a Gen X, right in that, so it's more fun to be Gen X than as boomer, because boomers, I forget it. So in other words, I went to college
too, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I went to college with a typewriter. Okay. A typewriter.
Wow.
and by the way, I graduated with that same typewriter. So in my career, I have gone from writing papers with typewriter and losing a full letter grade if you made one spelling mistake to what we're doing now. So having to first of all see that there's some different way of going to market. And when I started my analyst career at Gartner, I mean, we obviously none of this existed. So if you wanted to get out in the conversation, you did it through existing publications. And so you had to develop relationships with reporters, and you obviously had your own Gartner ecosystem, which was huge. But if you wanted to get outside, you had to do that. Well, we don't have to do that anymore. I work with all the trade press because they're all my friends, or at least most of them are. And I like it, but now I can go straight to,
just not Kevin, right? Kevin's annoying as hell. That guy.
There's a few that are a little bit annoying.
He's like the worst.
Now so the point is, how do you do this?
Yeah.
And for me, my launch was Clubhouse. I got on Clubhouse because I was listening to a Tim Dillon rant. I don't know if you follow him. He's a very funny comedian, a little edgy. And he started talking about this crazy thing, and it was the funniest little bit he did. And I just went on, didn't even know what social audio was. Back then you had to get asked to be, or
get an invite.
Get an invite. So I put in my request. Turned out one of my friends was already in. Immediately got me in. Started kind of figuring out, okay, this is a different format. You have to be a little bit edgy. You have to have something to say. And then another one of my friends was already doing some retail stuff in a room, and said, "Hey, Jeff, why don't you jump up on stage with us?" And so you started learning the cadence of how to engage, and what's not, what works, what doesn't work. And so I sort of developed the bit of my voice, or trained my voice in club. And then it's just such a logical evolution. If you want to, why in the world would you just do something live? I mean, it's you record once, publish, many times. That's actually the old Gartner models: write once, publish, forever. And so that logical evolution. Now, what does that mean? Well, now you got to think about things like microphones and headsets and all that lighting behind you, and what technologies you use. I mean, it's like going to a PhD, going after a PhD, learning all the, if you're not an audio engineer person. So just the knowledge, everything else falls into place. But once you know how to do it, and then you have to have the guts to hit publish that first time.
Yeah.
Because you're putting it out
there. Right.
So,
well, kind of a final question for you that talks to that, putting it out there. If we were to chat in 50 episodes, say like roughly a year's worth of podcasting, if it's a weekly, would you want your show to look like 50 episodes from now?
1,000 downloads.
1,000 downloads.
That's, I like what I'm doing. I like the energy. I like the fact that people talk to me in the startup world when I go to conferences now. I like the fact that people that I can platform people that have something to say.
Yeah.
I like the fact that I can cheerlead on strategies or trends that I like. And I'm happy to, like, the whole thing with the metaverse thing is like, okay, there's real technology here. Let's focus on the real technology. Let's get away from whatever. So that I love. But I'd just like to have a bigger voice. And that's the only thing because it's fun. I mean, it's a drug. Yeah. I mean, when you see those numbers come in and you can't do that, you cannot focus. Like in my case, I couldn't have a tighter, smaller space to operate in if I tried. The startup world, in the retail sector, and retail executives worrying about innovation.
Right.
I mean, that
very
is a
targeted,
very, very unique, a little group of fraternity. Passionate group, but we're not going to be driving 10,000 downloads, at least yet.
Right.
And that's by design, because that's a space I want to be in. That's a space that I want to cover now in this part of my career, and I'm having the time of my life talking to these startups. But so if I and just dialing in on video, because that's it's a whole new cat. I mean, audio, I thought audio was a challenge. Well, video takes that times 1,000. So that's where we're in the process of sort of evolving to video, and having that as a second solution, or a second offering.
Okay, man. So cool. Thank you so much for coming on here, man. Jeff, you have just schooled me, and it's been so much fun hearing your passion, and not only the challenges, but the strategies of asking a good question and shutting up. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for being on here.
Yeah, my pleasure.
For those listening, if you learned something, and I know you did, because I literally have a page of notes over here, then share this episode with someone else, right? If you got good information, get this good information in other people's hands. 1 person, 3 people, 9,424 people, whatever the number is. That's thought leadership, getting good information into other people's hands. And with that, Jeff, thank you again, sir. This has been an honor.
My pleasure. What a great conversation.
All right, everyone. This has been an amazing episode of Creating the Greatest Show. We will see you all next time. And next time doesn't have to be next week. Life's too short, and we have way too much to talk about. Find show notes full of takeaways, lessons, and links at creatingthegreatestshow.com. For more information on launching your own podcast or working with us to produce your existing show, come on down to the big tent at ringmaster.com. Until then, friends, whatever you do, do it with all your might. Work at it, if necessary, early and late, in season and out of season, not leaving a stone unturned and never deferring for a single hour. That which can be done just as well now. P.T. Barnum.
Thanks for giving today's pod a listen, and now a view. For more info, check out the show notes, and please give us a 5-star rating. Like and subscribe, as the kids say. It really helps us grow. If you'd like to be a guest, send me a note. We're always looking for innovative thought leaders and startups really doing interesting things. And make sure to come back for next week's episode.